They were not sent to destroy you. They were sent to destroy what God is building in you. And there is a difference, because what God is building in you is more threatening to the enemy than you are. You are a person. What God is building in you is a weapon, and the person assigned to dismantle it is not a stranger. They are someone whose voice you recognize before they finish their first word. Someone you would defend if anyone else dared to question them. And they have been quietly, one brick at a time, pulling apart what God has spent seasons constructing in you. You have felt it. You just did not know what you were feeling. By the end of this video, you will. Here is what makes this the most dangerous assignment the enemy has ever placed near your life. It did not arrive through someone you distrust. It came through someone you trust completely, because the enemy learned a long time ago that you will defend yourself against an obvious threat. But you will open every door, every conversation, every sacred deposit God is still forming in you, to someone you love, and they have been walking through every one of those doors, not to steal from you, to dismantle what is being built behind them. This video is not designed to make you suspicious of everyone you love. It is designed to give you the discernment that protects what obedience has built. Sign 1. They have been weakening your confidence in what God said. Before the teaching, a question. Have you ever left a conversation with someone feeling less certain about what God told you than when you entered it? Even though nothing obviously wrong was said? The conversation was warm. The time together was genuine. Nothing alarming happened. But something shifted. The clarity you carried into that room was slightly less clear when you left it. The confidence you arrived with came out thinner, and you could not pinpoint exactly when it happened, or what caused it. If that pattern is familiar, pay attention to what comes next, because this is not about one conversation. It is about a consistent withdrawal that has been happening across many of them. Every time you sit with this person, something in you is quietly spent. Not your energy, your certainty. Your settled sense of what God said, what He is building, what He called you to, leaves every encounter with them lighter than it arrived. In Nehemiah 4, Sanballat and Tobiah did not attack the builders physically. They attacked with words. What are these feeble Jews doing? Even what they build. If a fox climbs on it, it will break down their wall. They were not describing the wall being built. They were describing the wall they needed the builders to believe was being built. Because they understood something most believers never fully grasp. You do not have to destroy a building. You only have to change what the builder believes about it. This is the first and most foundational way someone you trust quietly destroys what God is building. Not through criticism, not through obvious discouragement, through the accumulated weight of conversations that each withdraw something small. So small you never notice the individual withdrawal, only the total deficit. Which conversations in your life consistently leave you doubting what God has already settled? The pattern of those conversations will tell you more than any single interaction ever could. Because the enemy does not always need to demolish what God is building. He only needs someone close enough to keep removing one brick at a time. But that is only the surface, because the next sign reveals something far more personal and far more costly. Sign 2. They have been shaping who you believe you are. Picture this. Someone who has known you for years sits across from you. They are not criticizing you. They are not discouraging you. They are telling stories about who you used to be, with warmth, with genuine love for the person you were before God started building the current version. And slowly, without either of you noticing, the room fills up with the old you, the old limitations, the old ceiling, the old identity that God spent a season deliberately dismantling. And you walk away from that conversation carrying it, not because they meant harm, because love for who you were can quietly become a ceiling on who you are becoming. What God is building in you is not just a work, it is a person, a new version of you, with new capacity, new authority in the specific territory He has called you to. And this person keeps calling the old version back, not maliciously, not with intent to harm, with love. Genuine, historically rooted love for the version of you that existed before God started the current construction. And every time that old version is spoken, the new construction loses ground. Here is the biblical picture that makes this visible. In John 1, the moment Jesus saw Simon for the first time, He looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Peter." He did not describe who Simon was. He declared who Simon was becoming. He spoke the new version over him before it had fully formed. And that declaration became the identity Peter spent his entire life growing into. Now consider the inverse. When the person closest to you consistently speaks the old version, when every frame they place around your future is built from your past, they are not describing who you are. They are deciding who you are allowed to become. A word spoken over you consistently by someone you trust does not stay outside you. It moves in. It becomes the ceiling you build under, without ever consciously choosing it as your ceiling. Notice which relationships in your life consistently make you feel smaller after engaging with them. Not through obvious criticism, but through the subtle way they frame who you are and what is possible for you. Not everyone who slows your growth opposes you openly. Some simply normalize the version of you that God already decided to outgrow. And if the first sign attacked your confidence in what God said, the third sign reveals the most targeted assault of all, because it goes after what God is currently placing in your spirit before it can take root. Sign 3. They have been handling what God deposited in you without authorization. There is a specific window between receiving what God deposits in your spirit and establishing it firmly enough that nothing can reduce it. In that window, while the deposit is still new, still forming, still finding its roots, it is the most vulnerable it will ever be. And this person has been present in that window, not because you were careless, because their response has become the environment in which what God deposits feels most real to you. Their voice has quietly become the second voice after God's, the one that tells you whether what you received was as real as it felt. And here is what has been happening every time you brought it to them. The deposit that arrived from God, pure, specific, weighted with the full authority of what He is building, entered their atmosphere and came back to you shaped, not destroyed, shaped, filtered through everything they believe about you, who you have been, what you have tried, what has not worked, rather than through the lens of who God is currently making you. You received it back and believed you had processed it. What you had actually done was hand the blueprint of what God is building to someone whose hands were never authorized to touch it. In Genesis 37, the moment Joseph shared his dream, the specific deposit God had placed in his spirit about what was coming, his brother's response did not receive what God had sent. It resisted it. Not because the dream was wrong, because the people he brought it to were not built to carry what God had placed in him. And that one conversation, that single act of bringing a sacred deposit into an atmosphere not prepared to hold it, began a chain of events that cost Joseph 13 years. The vision survived, but it survived despite that conversation, not because of it. What has God deposited into your spirit in the last 6 months that arrived with full weight and left every conversation with this person lighter than it arrived? That is not processing. That is erosion. And here is the line that changes how you understand every deposit God has ever sent you. What God places in you is sized for your assignment. What passes through the wrong hands before it is established arrives back-sized for their ceiling. The first 3 signs move through your thinking, your identity, your spiritual sensitivity. The fourth sign is different. It names what you have been doing, and it is the hardest one to hear. If something in this video is reorganizing how you have understood what has been happening in your life, type "I see the building" in the comments right now. Not as a conclusion about the person, as a recognition that the pattern finally has a name. What you can name, you can protect. Hit subscribe and stay for the fourth sign. It is where everything changes. Sign 4. You have been choosing the relationship over the building and calling it love. This is the sign that requires the most courage to receive. Not because it names what they have been doing, because it names what you have been doing. Somewhere beneath the surface of everything this video has described, the old version being called back, the deposits coming back lighter, there has been a quieter truth you have been living with. You have known, not fully, not with words, but in the space between what you felt and what you allowed yourself to think. Something in you has known that this relationship has been costing the construction. And you kept it anyway, not out of weakness, out of love. Real, genuine, sacrificial love for a person whose history with you carries real weight. A person whose absence would create a grief you are not yet sure you could carry. And that love, that specific, costly, genuine love, has been the most effective mechanism the enemy has used against what God is building in you. Because you will defend yourself against a threat, but you will sacrifice almost anything to protect a love. In 1 Samuel 15, God gave Saul a direct and complete instruction. Saul partially obeyed. He kept what he was not supposed to keep, not out of wickedness, but out of something that felt reasonable in the moment. And when Samuel confronted him, Saul said, "I did obey God." He genuinely believed it. Because partial obedience motivated by something that feels right does not feel like disobedience. It feels like a reasonable compromise. You have been making a reasonable compromise, keeping what God did not ask you to keep, protecting what He has been asking you to examine, choosing the comfort of the relationship over the completion of the construction. And the building has been reflecting that choice, brick by brick, deposit by deposit, conversation by conversation. Here is what I need you to carry with you long after this video ends. You cannot protect the relationship and the building simultaneously when the relationship has become the reason the building keeps losing bricks. Something has to change, not the person, not necessarily the relationship. What has to change is the agreement, the unspoken arrangement that has allowed this person access to territory in your life that was never designed for their hands. Discernment is not about seeing evil everywhere. It is about recognizing what consistently pulls you away from what God is building and having the courage to guard against it even when what you are guarding against wears the face of someone you love. Before you draw any conclusion, ask yourself 3 honest questions. 1. Is the pattern I have identified consistent and repeated across multiple seasons and multiple interactions? Or am I interpreting 1 or 2 difficult conversations through the framework of this video and arriving at a conclusion that evidence does not actually support? 1 difficult conversation does not constitute an assignment. A consistent, repeated withdrawal across many seasons does. Be honest about which one you have actually experienced. 2. Have I prayed specifically for this person, not about them, for them, with genuine love and genuine desire for their well-being? The discernment this video offers is not a weapon, it is wisdom. If what you are feeling is producing contempt rather than clarity, anger rather than discernment, bring that before God before taking any action. 3. Is there any possibility that what I am identifying as this person undermining the building is actually God using this relationship to reveal something in me that needs to change before the construction can continue? Sometimes the relationship that seems to be costing the building is actually exposing a foundation that needed to be strengthened. Ask God specifically before you conclude. Before anything else, take a breath. What this video placed in your hands is not a weapon. It is not a verdict. It is not permission to react, to confront, or to make any permanent decision from the emotion of this moment. It is clarity. And clarity, handled carefully and prayerfully, is the most powerful protection available for what God is constructing. 3 things this week, done quietly, done before God. First, stop bringing the blueprint to their hands. Whatever God is currently building in you, the direction, the vision, the specific deposit that is still forming, do not bring it into this person's atmosphere until it is fully established in your own spirit. Not as punishment, as protection. What is rooted in you before it is spoken cannot be reduced by the atmosphere it enters afterward. Second, audit the last 3 deposits. Write down the last 3 significant things God placed in your spirit. Beside each one, write what it looked like when it arrived and what it looked like after passing through this person's hands. That comparison will tell you more than any feeling about what this relationship has been costing the construction. Third, pray for them before you address anything else, not as a religious exercise, as an act of genuine love that refuses to let this revelation become a weapon. The person God is building you into does not withdraw love when it becomes costly. It learns to carry both the love and the wisdom simultaneously, without sacrificing one to protect the other. Every sign in this video has a corresponding prayer strategy, a prayer for protecting the deposit window, the space between receiving what God sends and establishing it in your spirit, and a specific declaration for the moment you choose to protect the building without abandoning the love. Free guide in the description. Use it before the next conversation with the person this video just named. What God has begun in you was never meant to be quietly dismantled by someone standing close enough to touch it. Type, "I see the building," in the comments. Find the person beneath you who typed the same thing and leave them 1 sentence, the kind that reminds someone who just saw clearly that clarity is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the construction God always designed. The greatest threat to what God is building is not always open opposition. Sometimes it is the quiet influence you stopped noticing. That is why the Holy Spirit gives discernment, not to fill you with fear, but to protect what He is faithfully, intentionally, irreversibly building in you. The building continues, not from where it stopped, from where God always intended it to go.